Welcome to episode 41 of Amari Purple Talk, a podcast where I share my thoughts on the Prince musical singularity. I'm your host, Richard Cole, also known as RCX, the funk soloist. And let's get started with today's episode. Alright, so this is going to be a very special episode of Amari Purple Talk. This will probably be the hardest episode, as much as an episode I really wish I did not have to do. But it seems that it was just a few weeks ago that we did an episode titled Echoes of Baltimore, and that was mostly commentary based on the murder of Amari. That was a few weeks ago. Or actually, that was a few months ago, but video had just surfaced at that time, and the murderers have been apprehended. So here we are, fast forward a few weeks later, and now we are honoring the memory of George Floyd, who was murdered by a Minneapolis police officer who held his knee to George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes. And about 2 of those minutes he was unresponsive. And we've all seen what's been going on not only in Minneapolis, just across the country. And I mean, there's even protests going on around the world. It's hard. I really don't have anything prepared for today. But we're going to try to put some perspective on it, because this is Amari Purple Talk, and this is a Prince podcast. And the flashpoint of all of this occurred in his hometown, a city that he was very proud of. Most entertainers, they come from, whether it's a small town or a different city altogether, and they leave it behind to live in New York or LA, Beverly Hills, Bel Air, wherever, Europe even sometimes, or make enough money to buy an island somewhere, but or have 2 or 3 homes anywhere but where they grew up. But not Prince. He stayed there because, in his own words, it's so cold it keeps the bad people out. Now, that being said, he grew up black neighborhood, Minneapolis. I've been to that city 3 times in my lifetime, 3 years in a row, in 92, 93, and in 94. And my impressions of it was that it was a very beautiful city. There's definitely the, brothers and sisters there that have lived there and grown up there all their lives. Very proud people. I've had family that moved there in 89. Some family members did leave, but I still have family that's still there. So, that being said, it's a very beautiful place to stay. I mean, really for me, I'm not a cold weather person, so I think that's what really stopped me from moving up there. Although there's probably times where I felt like I probably should have. But what I'm saying is that it's still an area that really in a lot of ways is no different from where I am here in St. Louis. As far as the population, yeah, there's more of us here than definitely in Minneapolis. But like I said, there's a lot of similarities. Reading The Beautiful Ones, hearing Prince speak about his years growing up as a child, going to high school, it's very, very reminiscent of where I grew up. So that being said, racism is not isolated to things you read in the history books regarding slavery and the South. The North didn't have Jim Crow laws, but, there was still a lot of racism that was prevalent. And here we are in 2020, and a lot of it is still prevalent today. We spent the last few months as a planet trying to deal with a virus that nobody seems to understand anything about. But yet, racism has been a virus that has been around for centuries. And I really think it's about time we got a cure for it. So, like I said, this is a Prince podcast. This happened in Prince's backyard. But it wasn't that long ago that something similar didn't happen in this backyard, in my backyard. In Ahmaud Arbery's backyard, in Sandra Bland's backyard, in Trayvon Martin's backyard. There's a list of names. Those are the ones that, because of we have social media now, we have cable, we have satellite, the world's a little bit smaller through those particular lenses. But there's a lot of there's a lot of names that we don't hear about nationally, for decades, for centuries, that we don't know. And like I said, this is, for me, a show where, it's about music. It's about an artist's body of work that has stood the test of time. But this is also an artist that was very aware of things. And, there's, every listener has a preference and everything is subjective, and I get that. But like I said, where Prince grew up is very similar to where I grew up. And he was aware of that, and he used a lot of what he accomplished to utilize as a platform. And maybe the bigger picture was to gain love for one another. But what was very close to him was the fact that if he could make a difference within his own community with people that look like him, going all the way back to, I remember the 1999 era, where he was doing benefit concerts for Marva Collins, and she was a school teacher making a difference with inner city youth in Chicago, and was doing benefits to help her organization. There's, the line in Hello, where against hungry children, our record stands tall, but there's just as much hunger here at home. The bigger picture was love for one another. Yes, the revolution was heavily influenced by Sly and the Family Stone with that dynamic, black and white working together, male and female working together in harmony. Yeah, that was the bigger picture. But our communities are fragmented. And if anything else, as far as Amari Communications, what I want to accomplish with or utilizing Amari Purple Talk with this episode, but doing other things with Amari Communications going forward or as part of the bigger picture, is to utilize this as a platform as well. And with that said, if the air is a little thick in this room tonight, I reckon it's the result of an onslaught of separatist rookies overcome by this colorful sight. Talking so fast that even they don't know what they mean. So I'm hoping that by the end of this, that there's a little bit more of an understanding, like I said, there's many levels of Prince fandom. And, there's the rock star image and all the things that come with being a rock star, the sexiness and all of that stuff, and I'm sure there's fans that just see that, that part of it, or they gravitate to certain songs. Then there are those that are a little bit more musically aware, the musician, that type of thing. There are just music lovers, collectors of music. So you may not just have Prince in your collection. You might have some, maybe some Bach or Beethoven as well, or some, Stevie Wonder, or you might have some, some Bob Dylan or something in your collection as well. So there's that level. And you probably already have a pretty good understanding on how things work, even if you were not a person of color. And, there are people, they always have rose-colored glasses on, and they think the world's a beautiful place, and that just comes from if they were taught that everything is beautiful. And yes, everything is beautiful, but there are these things in the world that exist, and I'm sure it's hard to comprehend what this is like. So, and then, I've encountered people that are so-called Prince fans that just don't get it. They're a product of their own environments. Now, this is not a sweeping indictment that, white people or Europeans are all racist. But be aware, and especially if anybody has taken a sociology class, that there are 3 degrees of racism that exist on the planet. The definitely overt kind, which brings out these murderers and people that just flat out just hate, and it's pronounced. But you also have, in addition to overt racism, you have institutional racism, meaning that a person of color could be just as qualified, if not more qualified, for certain positions in life, but are marginalized, passed over, or manipulated into other circumstances, or creating circumstances that are so uncomfortable that you either leave or you get asked to leave. And then there's just racism based on ignorance, meaning that you probably don't hate people, you don't hate other races or anything, but without a true understanding of other cultures, it could lead to misinterpretation, it could lead to misunderstanding. And so therefore, Again, this is why I want to use this particular episode and other projects as a platform to kind of whittle this down until it no longer exists. So I'm going to start but with the introduction to The Beautiful Ones. I'm sure a lot of you have already read it. If you have not read it, please do so. And if you don't have it, by all means, buy it. If you refer to episode 13 of Amari Purple Talk, I do cover that in depth. And there's other episodes where I actually do like a spoiler review and things of that nature. But what I want to do is read something that Prince said. It's in the introduction. And this is basically the introduction is Dan Piepenbring. He was the one that was handpicked by Prince to be sort of the co-author of this book and help him put it together. So this is his telling of how he got the job and basically what he and Prince had discussed in regards to what Prince wanted to accomplish by the release of this book. So this is Prince saying, "I stayed in Minneapolis because Minneapolis made me. You have to give back. My dad came to Minneapolis from Cotton Valley, Louisiana. He learned in the harshest conditions what it means to control wealth." Black Muse, and for those that don't know, Black Muse, it's a song on Hit and Run Phase 2. Really great album. Like I said, go check that out. Definitely check out this song. But Black Muse is about that. Creating wealth in the inner city and stopping eminent domain. So from there, he discusses with Dan Piepenbring, and in the telling of this book, he says he wanted to teach readers about Black Wall Street, a wellspring of black entrepreneurship that flourished in Tulsa, Oklahoma in the early 20th century. After the Civil War, as freed blacks flocked to booming Tulsa and bought land, segregation forced them to the city's Greenwood neighborhood, where their proprietorship and ingenuity created a thriving community. Soon Greenwood boasted hundreds of black-owned businesses, plus nearly 24 churches, a school, and a public library. It became one of the first and most essential examples of black prosperity in the United States. And then came Tulsa's 1921 race massacre. Their hatred fanned by accusations that a black boy had raped a white girl. Thousands of armed whites doused Greenwood in kerosene and burned it down block by block, looting and plundering as they went. Hundreds died, thousands more lost their homes. Black Wall Street was decimated. All right, so basically, for those that kind of have the rose-colored view or just the lack of understanding of what that means, you know, there's that argument that this is the 21st century. Slavery was a long time ago. The Civil War was a long time ago. Jim Crow was a long time ago. There's the Civil Rights Act. Congratulations, you're Americans. Good luck. Well, it's not quite that simple. You know, I did some research on, basically, it's the Immigration Act of 1924. Because I really wanted to know, you know, we live in a country where it says that if you're born here, you are an American citizen automatically. So the thing is this, is that, there's the Statue of Liberty, there's, lots of you that are from various cultures, whether it's Italian, whether it's Jewish communities, Polish communities, things of that nature, the whole romanticized idea that your ancestors came over on a boat and, started with little or nothing, but, either built a business or built something that was passed down to generations, and now here you are. And yes, they've encountered certain bouts of racism, but the key thing when it comes to being a culture, black is a color. And really, it just really took the insight of James Brown to give us a definition that we could be proud of, that we can say it very loud that we're black and we're proud. After Negro and colored and the other N-word folks, which nobody really felt comfortable with. So again, but it was something that was to give us a sense of pride. The rest was really supposed to be up to us. And that is to really define what a culture is. Now, when I spoke of your ancestors making a choice to flee whatever conditions, whether they were harsh conditions or whether just the mythology of America was so fascinating that it's like, oh, let me just go over there and see if I can make a fortune or make a life, something. Those were voluntary decisions. And at the end of the day, I'm sure most of you, regardless of where you're living, if you're living in America, if you're living in Europe, if you're living in Mexico, South America, Australia, wherever you're living, that if you can trace your lineage, and you don't have to know the names of everybody, but for a fact, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that your lineage came from, say, England or Italy or wherever, and that the majority of your population identifies with a particular religion, whether let's just take Italy for instance. And Christianity was legally adopted by the Roman Empire in the 3rd century. So that begat the Holy Roman Empire, and thus Catholicism was born. So that's beyond a shadow of a doubt what your lineage is, what your religion is. Though you may not be able to tie yourself to the Medicis, but most of you have an entire culture. So say like if a movie like The Godfather comes out and it's depicting Italians in a certain way, meaning that, we're going to associate all Italians with the mafia. Then you have an entire culture, which is also backed by the Catholic Church, to say that no, all Italians are not like that. And it's put in a certain perspective. So when people go see The Godfather, they don't associate all Italians with the mafia. There you have it. If an individual from a particular culture does something that's pretty much against the entire belief system of that culture, meaning if they committed an evil act or something like that. Because of, you can pinpoint that culture, that country's history, and not associate everyone from that country. It's just like, oh, that person just did an evil act, doesn't represent us. And even in the creation of opportunities, there's, whether they're little small community organizations or big cultural organizations, to where you're giving opportunity, you're helping build wealth or create wealth, or like I said, you're unified. In other words, really my definition of culture is a group of people that own their religious structure, their educational structure, their economic structure. Those three things. As descendants of Africans that were forcibly brought over here to literally build this country by hand over generations with no pay, and separated families and strategic separation so that there's no real organization to provide the ability to fight back. Now, that's not to say that there weren't uprisings that did happen. There's actually more than what your history books and what schools will tell you. But our ancestors that were forced over here did not accept this willingly. They did not happily accept it. And what pisses me off is that there are now TV shows, movies that tend to want to rewrite that narrative to paint that picture. School books are being rewritten to make it seem like, oh, it wasn't that bad. But that is the second Dark Ages. The first Dark Ages occurred in Europe because the Catholic Church wanted all information to go through them, which means that a lot of Europeans did not know how to read or write. It was considered magic if there was an individual that was not a priest or a friar or whatever. It was considered magic. Meanwhile, in Africa, in Timbuktu, in Songhai, and Zimbabwe, there were three major universities. The Moors were in Spain, advancing technology to the point that had Isabella and Ferdinand had not kicked them out along with the Jewish bankers, if they were not kicked out, we right now would probably be living in an era very similar to what you see on Star Trek, had that not happened. That's how advanced they were, living in Spain after helping the indigenous culture in Spain at that time. They were advancing technology while the rest of Europe was, like I said, totally illiterate. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is that these things cause a ripple effect. And that ripple effect has created this ridiculous illusion of racism, white supremacy, to the point that it doesn't matter what your economic background is. Every time something happens, it's to the point where there is absolutely no justice whatsoever. None. Little or none. So I had to do my fact checking as far as the immigration system, because this is the thing. And for those of you, like I said, with the romanticized view of America, you know, yes, there is a United States Constitution, you know, that says we the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice and ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish the United States of America. That was written when my ancestors that were forcibly brought over here, they didn't consider them as America. It wasn't written with them in mind. If you want to go back to the Declaration of Independence itself, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. No, my ancestors were in bondage when that was written. Otherwise, ladies and gentlemen, before the ink would have dried after writing that particular line, the chain should have come off right then and there. So where I'm going with this is that if, say, generations, let's for argument's sake say that since 1863, that any black person that was born in the United States of America after 1863 is an American citizen, or for the sake of the Immigration Act of 1924, because they rewrote the language to ensure that any immigrant, regardless of where you're from, doesn't outnumber the number of white people living in the United States of America as American citizens, born and raised. So let's just say that even after 1924, now I'm born in 1966, so of course, obviously, yes, I'm an American citizen. But however, to quote Malcolm X, if we were Americans, we would not have needed legislation like a civil rights bill, because that we were born here, we should have already been citizens and entitled to everything that an American citizen is entitled to. You know, there would have not been a need for a Voting Rights Act if that was the case, if we were considered American, despite the fact that there are generations that have been born here in this country. The level of economic disparity and brutality itself. And let's put it this way. Here's another question. So if someone white and or young or white, or it doesn't matter the age, but if someone white commits a terrorist act on American soil, then why is it that they get due process? In the case of the Charlotte church shooting, the boy was hungry and they stopped for Burger King. How is that possible when terrorist acts, as far as I know, and if there's any constitutional law, lawyers and or constitutional law students, please comment and correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't terrorist acts considered treason and usually punishable by death? So how is it that they're getting due process per the United States Constitution, but anytime an unarmed, and let's not get it twisted, folks, unarmed black person is apprehended, they're murdered in cold blood. They're complying, they're unarmed, they're showing no aggression. And never mind, okay, whether they're committing a crime or not, again, there's a constitution that says we are all due as American citizens the due process of law. Which means that if you're apprehended by law enforcement, it does not give them the right to become, at that moment, judge, jury, and executioner. No, that only happens in the Judge Dredd comic book, and that's fiction. That's make-believe. It's a comic book. You know. So, listeners of Amari Purple Talk that may not understand fully what's going on, that's the frustration that we deal with. You know, where we're automatically judged, mainly, first and foremost, by skin color. Second of all, sometimes even just how we look or how we dress. Sometimes, when we have been influential in every single aspect of American culture. So, you know, you rednecks out there jamming your country music, that banjo is an African instrument. Give it back. You know, jazz, rock and roll, you know, Elvis was a hero to most, but he never meant shit to millions. He's straight out racist. The sucker was simple and plain. Motherfuck him and John Wayne. You know, we laid to rest Little Richard, you know, the architect, the emancipator, the inventor of rock and roll. So, you know, you Nazis would just be listening to German folk tunes. You know, there'd be no death metal for you. There'd be no country music for you. So, terrorists, if they're Caucasian, can get Burger King and a fair trial. But someone, okay, key word here, folks, someone who was suspected of having a counterfeit $20 bill, and the sentence is murder without a trial or facing a jury of your peers. This is why Prince felt compelled to help people during his career. You know, like I say, forget the image, or like I said, if you're aware of the activism, if you're aware of the philanthropy, and a lot of it was anonymous, but like I said, even back in the day, you know, we did know about the benefits for Marva Collins. But, you know, and we don't, you know, usually think of Prince like, you know, Marvin Gaye's What's Going On album. You know, we take a song like Sign of the Times, and I mean, that basically summed it up. Sometimes I wish that the Sign of the Times album was a little bit more like a What's Going On, more like a Superfly soundtrack, more of that. Still my favorite album, my favorite Prince album, period. But, you know, everything is right there just in that one song alone. You know, didn't need a whole album. I mean, really, you got that, and you can probably just skip to the cross, and that's basically all you need. It really could have just put that out as a two-sided single, and that would have been enough. But, you know, like I said, there's those little nuggets, like in Hello. You know, we're against hungry children. Our record stands tall. but there's just as much hunger here at home. You know, there's, dance on. So every now and then there was a little drop of knowledge here and there. And, as he got older, with especially, when his own career was on the line, he put his career on the line because he was dealing with the institutional racism that is known as the record industry. And, there's a lot of talented brothers and sisters that are still sort of slaves to that system. Because, we desperately, we need a contemporary what's going on. Groups like NWA, they were definitely of the time. They were right there. It was like lightning in a bottle almost. So to really come out with a record or an album, a song or an album that really captured what we were feeling, the frustration we were feeling, to have that, we don't have that so much now. It's kind of, we already know. You don't have to tell us. And you really don't have to listen to the record company. I'd say, take that risk, take that shot and say, look, this is what I want to say. This is going to have an album that's going to speak to the people. Let's tap into those frequencies once again and do that. But, anyway, but like I said, as Prince was getting older, there was Baltimore, there was Black Muse, there was the Rainbow Children, there's Family Name, there's the Everlasting Now, so like I said, as he was fighting for his own freedom from institutional racism, he was turning holding that mirror up to the overt racism, or even the racism by ignorance, and at the same time, love for one another, but like I said, it's, as an individual, we can make that choice to do that, to take everyone as an individual. We can do that. But as a collective, like I said, if you're Italian, you have your whole culture's history. You have ancestors that have instilled in you where you come from. Even if you were born in America, wherever you're from in Italy, that's, where that is. You can physically go there and maybe even meet your actual relatives there, but descendants of slaves during the American slave trade, that was not an option, because, see, the whole thing, this whole fallacy of racism, white supremacy, it stems from fear and placing value on things that any other culture, any indigenous culture, whether it's Native Americans here or Africans there, the natural resources, it was understood that it was a part of nature. And those indigenous cultures had pretty much an equilibrium with nature, meaning that the land was for everyone. It's that European mentality of, ooh, this is gold, it must be valuable. Only because they said, oh, it's valuable, or let's put a price tag on it. When other cultures, it was just part of the earth, and they just utilized it, and whether it was to make art, or whether it was, as jewelry of some sort, it had a spiritual purpose, or it had a harmonious purpose with nature. It wasn't a thing of, oh, only royalty can own this piece of gold, or only if you're wealthy. You know, ancient Egyptian culture, your family was your wealth. Your children, how many children you had was your wealth. There was no monetary value. The monetary value that the way we think of economics today, that started with ancient Greece. The roots of it, with coins and things of that nature. You know, and paper money, that's a whole different concept. It's just really the treasury can just print however much money it can print. There's no real value on it, but we live and die by it every day. And what we're experiencing now, because we still have this idea of economics, it's because, you know, what we're facing now, a lot of people out of work now, you know, because of the stay-at-home order. George Floyd, victim of the stay-at-home order. He was out of work because of this COVID-19 thing. And, you know, suspected, no real proof. Now, if you work in retail, you've got a counterfeit pen. You should, if you don't have a counterfeit pen, you need to get one, or you need to be on some Frank Abagnale shit and no money. And basically, paper money printed by the United States Treasury, it's a certain percentage of cotton and a certain percentage of linen. Basically, literally, you can literally sleep on a bed of money because of that cotton linen ratio to it. The type of paper, the watermarks that are involved. You know, you take a $20 bill, you run it across Andrew Jackson's jacket, and if you feel the ridges, it's real as a mug. If you don't feel those ridges, then you might want to break out that counterfeit pen as a second opinion before you start accusing innocent people of some bullshit. You know, and two, you know, that being the case, then that's a federal offense. Your job is just basically holding that person for the FBI or the Treasury Department to send their agent to investigate, and they take the prisoner from there. Again, this is not a Judge Dredd comic book. It's not a Judge Dredd movie. No one has appointed you judge, jury, and executioner. And Derek Chauvin, which sounds French, sounds very close to Chauvinot. And for those of you who are not aware of Chauvinot, that was Napoleon's right-hand man. That was his second in command. And basically, this Chauvinot was such a fucking bastard that this is where the word chauvinist comes from. So when someone is regarded as a male chauvinist, it's because of Napoleon's right-hand man. In fact, Chauvinot was the one that blew the nose off of the Sphinx. You know, because they were, again, this whole stupid thing of racism, white supremacy. They were so threatened by the big nose on the Sphinx. They were so threatened by the beauty of Africa. And Egypt is in Africa, boys and girls. It is not in the so-called Middle East. Only as a geopolitical religious thing is it considered the Middle East. But look at your map, folks. Egypt is in Africa. And Ethiopians were very instrumental at the start of civilization. The ancient Egyptians advanced it to levels that are astounding to this day. So to build something as magnificent as the Sphinx, it just threatened some folks. And they got a little frightened and started doing stupid shit like firing cannons at the nose for target practice. So, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some weird ass genetic connection to that. But it did not give him the right to play judge, jury, and executioner. And, you know, this is something that definitely should result in a first degree murder, although that has not been the charge. It's only third degree, and manslaughter was one of the counts as well. So, you know, this is why this was like the last straw. Michael Brown was the last straw. You know, Emmett Till was the last straw. Martin Luther King was the last straw. Malcolm X was the last straw. All of it, you know, is the last straw with it, you know. And that's hence the frustration, hence the anger, hence what's been going on. Now, a lot of the protests have been very, very peaceful, and I believe that the destruction is just a small handful of just idiots. And a lot of times there's people that come from out of town. Chances are there's some, you know, if we're in the Matrix, it's like some agents that are, you know, that have infiltrated, that's causing the destruction and trying to, you know, put some, you know, throw some salt on the wound. And, you know, but the thing is that, you know, we, you know, like I said, you given, you know, the feeling of absolutely no hope. You know, there's none. You know, somebody can come along and lead the way, but there's, you know, there's always an asterisk that's put there, you know, whether by discreditation or assassination, one of those two, you know. And the thing is that, yes, thank you for all the voices around the world that are speaking up and speaking out, the peaceful movements. And yeah, now that some things are torn up, you know, in the words of Killer Mike, you know, we need to plot and plan and strategize. And see, this is the thing. Like I said, fear is very paralyzing. You know, like, I'm going to use a Star Wars analogy here, but fear, anger, jealousy are passed to the dark side. And yes, it's a Star Wars analogy, but George Lucas, those philosophies are very ancient Egyptian. They're Buddhist. That shit belongs to us. I'm just taking it back. All right. You know, cool. I enjoy Star Wars and stuff. But George, you know where you got that from. You spoke with Joseph Campbell. You know where you got that from. So I'm just taking it back. So that's the whole thing. Fear, anger, jealousy. And that is what fuels racism, white supremacy. Right there. Those three things are fueling it. So this is why, again, someone Caucasian can commit the most heinous terrorist act, whether it's shooting up a school, blowing up a building, whatever, and can get a sandwich or a drink of water and a fair trial on top of that. A brother just merely suspected, because the clerk don't know, because he didn't have a counterfeit pen to prove otherwise, and he damn didn't sure know what the composition of paper money consists of to get his Frank Abagnale shit on and be able to recognize it right off the bat. So, you know, so, and that person doesn't get to go home to his family. You know, he's crying for his mother who's deceased. And when it gets to that point, that's what's heartbreaking. The fact that this was, you know, a young person. I'm not even going to say, I mean, I'm sure it's all over social media now, but out of, you know, just due respect for minors, you know, I'm not going to say the name on there, but to capture that moment on video, and all of us have seen it, and we couldn't turn away from it, to watch life leave a body. I know I used to, when it comes to these dumbass reality shows and just the ridiculousness of it, I said it's like nobody's going to be happy until somebody actually is filmed losing their life on camera. And now here we are, and this isn't the first time. This is not the first time. Not the first time in Minneapolis, on top of that, where we've seen this on film, in real time, in real life. It's not a movie, it's not a TV show, it's real. And everyone's always compliant. There's no, this isn't somebody that's murdered 20 people or murdered even one person, or even just shot at one person or anything like that. It's just these little tiny things like a minor traffic stop or this or that. Everything checks out. Everything is, but it's just that innate punk ass fear that, that all sense of logic, that these so-called Christian men are committing these acts. And scared of what? And it's like, do we have to go all the way back to the Hyksos to try to figure out why? Dr. Finch, in his book Echoes of the Old Dark Land, during the Dark Ages, not the Dark Ages, I'm sorry, the Ice Age, so to speak, because at one point most of Africa was very fertile. The Sahara, Sub-Sahara, it was all very fertile land at one point before it became desert. And Africans, especially ancient Egyptians, it was at one point society was matriarchal, meaning that, the women ran the show. Even when it switched somehow to patriarchal society, there was an equality between men and women. And really what gave women the edge was that they were the inventors of agriculture. Now, you see, America now, you think of agriculture, you think of farmers, and you see the white guy and his farm hands, and they're proud of the land, they're tilling the land and all of that. And that's cool. But women, black women, African women, invented agriculture. So they had, like I said, and there was really not economics in that, but they had a power base and something to contribute to the community. So when the males, if they were unsuccessful in the hunt, there was still an abundance or an abundant food source that was available. Now, in the mountains, in the Caucasus Mountains, during the Ice Age, over generations, there was not that luxury. So the males had to be more aggressive, so to speak, and everything, because their lives depended on it. If they were unsuccessful in the hunt, there were no vegetables to grow. There was nothing to eat. There was nothing else that the women could produce besides children. So they had no equal platform. They were taught to be subservient. And we're back to the Chavanel thing again, aren't we? So generations of being trapped in the ice bred this ruthless nature, this so-called survival of the fittest thing. And once things thawed out and they came down from the mountains and they saw these Africans and they saw all this equality going on, it kind of freaked some folks out. So if we're going to go back that far to pinpoint the fear, well, you know, if we bring up 400 years of slavery and we're told to get over it, well, what I'm going to tell y'all is this. Y'all need to get over that white supremacy shit, because that's some bullshit. This is one big planet, and again, there's something for everybody. And if it's down, even if it's down to just a few people, because they're holding on to their billions and their trillions, and they're just frightened that they'll lose their power, you know, by being fair or being nice or just having the world be at peace. You know, y'all just gonna have to come up off of that, because, you know, it's just gonna head the planet to destruction, to ruin. You know, we're not taking care of the planet like we should be. You know, there's this thing that's running around. You know, we don't know what it is. Nobody, there's not a world leader or anybody that's given a straight answer. You know, it's got everybody baffled. Oh, it's a virus. Oh, it's this and that. But it's not behaving like one. Something is going on. Again, like I used to say in previous episodes, regardless of the agenda, then, you know, we got to start giving the law back to God, like Prince used to say. And, you know, not give into this thing called entropy. You know, yes, we're angry, and yes, these situations happen. And then for those that are looking at this and like, oh, well, they shouldn't riot, and just, damn it, there's a history, your history books. What's this thing? The Boston Tea Party, the Revolutionary War. You know, this country was founded on the basis of a riot. So you know, I don't want to hear it. So, yeah, again, y'all just need to, because again, it's racism by ignorance. You know, understand where things come from. Yes, it's a long time ago, but there's a ripple effect. 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation. No, there were no programs. I mean, there was Reconstruction, but that was mainly to integrate the Confederate South back into the fabric of the United States of America. Yes, it did produce the situations in which a Black Wall Street could exist, but when you got a bunch of poor white people that have been programmed by the so-called elite that slavery is necessary, because you have to remember slavery was $1 billion business. The United States of America is built on the foundation of two things, slavery and opium. The slavery was to cultivate all the natural resources of this continent to also build fortunes. But that labor force, the buying and selling of human beings. Now, you know, slavery is wrong across the board. So to those that are like, well, if your people were slaves or whatever for a quick minute, or you know, slavery exists. Yes, slavery existed since pretty much the dawn of time. But the rules of engagement was that if I kicked your butt in a war, y'all worked for me. But there was no selling. There was no money trading hands. And you still reap the benefits of being a citizen of whatever, or you earn the right to be a citizen of whatever. And once you were a citizen, then, you know, you benefited from whatever it is, whether it's all the legislation, due process of law, financial opportunities and things of that nature. You know, I'm not indicting, you know, the human, you know, certain flaws of the human experience, but the rampant bloodshed, the stripping of a culture, the separating of families, entire families, forcing people to breed like cattle for economic gain, forced labor for gain, and to have that go on for several hundred years, and then you just turn everybody loose and say, well, good luck. But then you've conditioned generations of people, regardless of economic level. You've conditioned and programmed them to think that they're superior, that they are now threatened, just like people are threatened now by the prospect of immigration, the loss of jobs, and things of that nature. They're so threatened that the fear overrides all sense of logic and breeds this very ignorant thing of racism, white supremacy, which breeds this tragic sense of violence as the first and only response. One of my favorite Black Panthers is Fred Hampton. And he was smart enough to realize that these fans of racism are being, the flames of racism are being fanned. And it was the thing of, let's get the two sides together and let's talk and realize we have a common goal. And that common goal really is that we all just want to feed our families. We all just want to eat. We all just want to have a roof over our heads. We all just want to be able to take care of our families. We all want to be able to enjoy a quality of life. The pursuit of happiness, it's just common sense. I think people are just too blinded by greed of not only money, but power and political opportunity, that it's just common sense. These laws are established and no one, absolutely no one is above the law. And something like that, it's like, no, there's no justification based on that video and video from surrounding areas too. There's no justification for it. You cannot explain that away. It's the bottom line. The job is to protect and serve. It's right there. Simple as that. To protect and to serve. Not to play judge, jury, and executioner on the spot. Now, it's one thing. Like I said, no, job is tough. I know it's a tough job. But that was a situation, again, it was just blatantly obvious. Just blatantly obvious. That, like I said, that should be automatic first degree murder. And, there needs to be justice behind that. And again, that's why we're frustrated. That's why this was another, and that's the thing, it's another breaking point. How much longer, how many more breaking points do we need as a society to say, let's all work together and figure this out? If there's anything, like I said, I know that the listeners of Amari Purple Talk are from all over. Like I said, we hear your voices, overseas. I saw the protests in Germany. Let's see, I think there was one in France. I saw, I've seen all the from all the different cities. I used to live in San Francisco for a while. I watched the protests there and everything. And, it reminds me of the situation in Egypt, to where they gave peace a chance. There was no violence, there was nothing that was being burned or anything, again, it was the military or whatever that was getting out of line with it. But the peaceful protest did bring about change. But again, like I said, you watch something like this and it's hard, it's difficult, and truth be told, something like that was inevitable. But now that this is done, you know, just like the Boston Tea Party, just like the Revolutionary War itself, then us as a people, as what are, you know, black, African American, descendants of Africans that were forced to live in America, you know, this is where, you know, we create our Declaration of Independence. And, you know, and we're going to mean it, we, the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, and ensure domestic tranquility. You know, or, you know, we hold these evidence that all men and women are created equal. You know, we need to put the female back into the spiritual equation. You know, you can't have a father and son without the mother. You know, you cannot have the true Trinity is the mother, father, and child. You know, you can't have father, son in some intangible spirit. You know, that's what causes a lot of this confusion in the first place. It feeds into the chauvinist aspect of religion by stripping the woman of power, by blaming that woman for all of sin itself, you know, which is the ridiculous thing. You can't have something that says honor your mother, but then have a verse in that same book that says all that's born of woman is unclean. It causes too much confusion for ordinary folks. That's why there's perversions. That's why there's serial killers out there. There's, you know, that's too crazy of programming for society. It's too crazy. So you have to put the woman back into that equation. And, you know, with us, we have to be on the same level as Asians and Jews and Italians and the Spanish and, you know, the Latin communities and things. You know, like I said, nobody's history is perfect and nobody's history is all squeaky clean. But we, above all others, need to be on that level, which means we all need to decide what the religion is going to be. Throw it all out. You know, we need to stop adopting maybe traditions and philosophies from other cultures. You know, we need to stop, you know, worshiping the Godfather and Scarface. You know, maybe we need to, you know, some of y'all need to stop being the real fake housewives of Atlanta or whatever. And, you know, sisters out here buying Prada and Gucci, you know those products, you know the material inside and out by now. Come together, come up with your own brand or whatever. And that's not to say, hey, you know, you can't cross over, but it's like what they're doing for their descendants. They're doing for their culture. You know, it's cool to be a consumer, but we need more owners. We need more inventors. You know, we need more of that. And then we can come to the table and then figure out how we can all have love for one another. You know, and like I said, I think that's basically what Prince was trying to accomplish, especially within the later years of his life, is to try to come up with that definition of, well, definitely achieve freedom, achieve ownership, and that definition of funk, which, remember a few episodes ago, I came up with the idea that finding the funk means that you found that thing in life that allows you that freedom, that allows you that ownership. And once you've accomplished those two, the abundance, the happiness, that feeling, you're in control of your own life, and that your own spiritual self and your journey is abundant and fulfilling and positive and loving and giving, and that you have deeper love for yourself, and again, love for one another. That's what we need to do next. That's the next step. Figure out some ownership, and then let's figure out some freedom, or some freedom that'll lead to the ownership. So, like I said, this is definitely the heaviest and the hardest episode. Like I said, I don't think that I could have gone through this episode today without, I wanted to talk about the Sign of the Times rumor today, but again, it's still just a rumor. No official word from the estate or anything like that. But yeah, maybe we'll address it next week, or I'll wait. Maybe they'll announce something on the 7th. I'll wait till then, and then we'll discuss that then. I was hoping to get my Rainbow Children and Up All Night sets today, but it's still in transit, so I'll wait until I actually get them. So hopefully next week we'll be able to discuss that also. But yeah, like I said, I wish I had the actual answers to everything that's been going on. It's been just heavy, and we're still dealing with the whole COVID thing. I'm still out there on the front lines, so to speak, even though a lot of people are just, you say the word open or reopen, and people just think that the danger's over, and there's so much going on. And like I said, I don't know. I thought that I'm not as prepared as I thought I should be, but situations like this, who's ever ready? No one is ever ready. You just have to do what you do and know yourself, know your skill set, and just try to live in that positive direction. Let's move in a positive direction. Let's have a positive outcome and positive future. So let's take some of these examples as inspiration. I think we're at a point now, don't look for the leaders, or as Bob Dylan would say, don't look for the leaders in the parking meters. We've got to be leaders within ourselves. And that's just what it comes down to. There's nobody that has the answer. Like I said, these governments out here with the COVID don't know what's going on, or if they do, they're not really making you feel comfortable. You're at home and worried, or you're forced to go back to work now and you're worried. A lot of us never stop going to work, like myself, and worried. But it's like, hey, you just gotta, like I say, know yourself, trust in your spirit, or trust in your spiritual system, and even if it's a thing of, oh, nothing will happen to me because I trust my spiritual system, just be respectful of everybody else. It's like if a storefront or a restaurant says you must have a mask, don't argue. Just go ahead. If you want to support that business, then make them feel comfortable. Make the other patrons feel comfortable. It's not just about you. It's not just about me. And like I said, everything else is going on. Like I said, I've seen everything that's going on in different cities, and and the destruction, and I get the anger from my people, and I get the anger across the board. People are out of work, people are frustrated, but let's, let us, as the Prince musical singularity, let's try to just, let's try to be on the same page. Let's just try to come together. Maybe we can figure it out or something. But like I say, my brothers and sisters that listen to Amari Purple Talk, like I said, we got to figure out how to be owners. Let's start, being inventors. Let's try to create our own Wakanda right here. Let's just, or even not on a physical level, let's create a Wakanda in a spiritual level, and let's help some folks out. Let's be a community. So again, that's this episode of Amari Purple Talk. Of course, you can always find me on Twitter at RichardCole_now and on Instagram at RichardCole_Amari. And thank you very much for tuning in this week. Like I said, this is a hard episode to do, but I just could not let this week go by and not address it and try to, hopefully this helps get to a level of understanding. There's other podcasts as well that will be addressing this topic too. So looking forward to checking those out as well. And like I said, I hope it helps. A little bit of understanding. And like I said, Prince was, it wasn't just about the lace and the high heels, and, it wasn't always about Head or Darling Nikki or anything like that. He was an artist through and through, and real artists, that's what they do. They hold that mirror up to society and challenge us with it. So, dig a little deeper. Check out some Rainbow Children, and check out some Artificial Age, and check out some Love Sexy, and check out Hello, and check out Sign of the Times even. And I mean, do a deeper dive too. Prince was, later on was checking out some John Henry Clark, read some John Henry Clark. One book of his I have is called Christopher Columbus and the African Holocaust, Slavery and the Rise of European Capitalism. I highly recommend that. Check out Prince's The Beautiful Ones. Like I said, he was, trying to lay some blueprints that would inspire, not only African American communities, but, he knew Prince fans of all over, bring some understanding to some conditions. And, sometimes I'm kind of the mindset of Malcolm X, to where it's like, well, what can we do for you guys? And it's like, well, nothing. But I'll say this, no, you can't teach us ownership or freedom. We have to be inventors, and we have to be owners on our own with that. But like I said, when it comes to speaking up and speaking out, speak up with your vote, speak up, or, create your own platform, do a podcast, or go on YouTube or something, just, there's no harm in people being together and getting together and living together in harmony. There's nothing wrong with that. Like I said, the fear is what's fanning the flames of all racism, white supremacy, and you can't teach them not to be scared, but there's more of us on the planet loving one another than there are people that just are filled with just blind fear and hatred. And that fear is because there is a lack of understanding. So the racism by ignorance is what's feeding the overt racism. So, I think it's time to feed the world a little bit more love and peace and knowledge as well. So with that, I'm going to sign off. George Floyd, we got you, and we're going to keep it purple and on the one.